大家好，欢迎来到我的 YouTube channel, and I'm so glad to have all of you here. Today, we have a little bit of a special video. I have a friend who is also learning Chinese, and after having a few chats, we kind of realized that we have a little bit of a different learning style, and I thought it would be interesting to show how different people who have different learning styles can still learn Chinese or any other language in a really cool, exciting, fun, and efficient manner. So I want to introduce my friend Nina,
Hi.
who comes from Germany. Nina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name's Nina, and I'm currently living in Berlin, in Germany. And I've been learning languages for, ever since I was little, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. And currently, I've started learning Chinese, and that's actually how Bianca and I met. I watched one of her videos on YouTube about like her Chinese learning experience, and I really resonated with it, and I could like kind of relate to a lot of the things that she was saying, and I really liked the things that she was talking about. So I decided to reach out to her to, kind of connect and have a conversation. And fast forward some time, and now we're here.
We love a good internet stranger. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. And Nina has her own YouTube channel as well, so please check out her channel. I will leave the link in the description below. And one of the really cool things that Nina does is actually have interviews with app developers for a lot of language learning apps. For most of my viewers, you know that I do not use apps at all. I have a strict no app policy, but Nina really likes using apps and trying different things out. So that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. Should one use or not use an app when learning a language? One of the coolest things actually discussing with Nina about our difference of opinions for a lot of these things is that even though we may have very, very differing views on the usefulness and the utility of using language learning apps, we can still acknowledge that different methods can still lead to really great results and still be highly efficient and really exciting and fun while learning a language. So in this video, I will try to convince Nina apps may not be the most conducive or helpful to learning, maybe a little bit more inefficient.
Yeah, and we're also doing the opposite on my channel, in which we're making a video where I explain why I think that language learning apps are actually a great thing that you can use when you're learning a language.
Who's right? Who's wrong? I don't know. We'll see. Leave it in the comments below who you think is right in this matter. Actually, don't do that. We can all have different learning styles, and that's fine. My first pet peeve about language learning apps is that it's not the most conducive to the way that our brain naturally learns things. I do study the brain for a living, and it doesn't work well when you're trying to shove a lot of information from vocab lists that don't have other connections. Our brain is a pattern-making machine, and the way that it solidifies, reinforces, and generates a lot of these connections that are essential for producing, understanding, and creating language. It requires a web of different things that reinforce those connections. And if you're just going through an app, like let's say Duolingo. I know Duolingo gets crapped on a lot. I don't know, it just bothers me that you go through words and then there's no sentences related to it. It's just words in isolation, out of context. I just don't think that that's the most beneficial.
Yeah. And I totally get your point, and I definitely see why this is not the most efficient way that we can learn anything. But for me, one of the biggest things that I can get out of language learning apps is the feeling of, reward, the kind of reward feeling that you get out of it, like the instant gratification. And then of course with that also the feeling of motivation that you get out of this, gratification and this feeling good about what you've just done. And this is the thing that app developers have to work on the most when they're doing an app. They have to try to be able to include as many instant gratification signals for the user to receive as often as possible, so they can keep using the app. It is like a psychology phenomenon that if you feel like you're making progress, that you're going to be happier about it and more likely to keep doing something that makes you feel good. And it's also of course then turned into like a marketing strategy for app developers or any sort of resource creator to try to profit off of those dopamine rushes. Even though it is like kind of like a marketing thing for them, it does work.
So do you think that this activation of the reward pathways, and those of you who are science nerds, the dopamine reward pathways, do you think that this leads you to want to continue to learn more intensively after that specific app is done, or does it just stop once you finish today's lesson?
Yeah, no, for me it does carry on, since I mean, it's not like I'm getting a good feeling or a dopamine rush from using the app once, like the first time, and that kind of motivation that I get out of that has to last me for like forever. Like I get those, you know, reward feelings, and the user gets reward feelings every time you open the app. So it does make you, you know, keep wanting to come back to the app, and it does bring consistency with it, since you know that every time you're going to use it, you're going to get some sort of gratification or a good feeling. So in that way, it is consistent. It is consistent because I'm just gonna be more likely to open the app like more times every single day, and it kind of brings with it like a chain reaction. So at the end, a lot of, you know, small things are gonna amount to something big. And I mean, it's the same principle with the rewards themselves that you get from using the app. Like the rewards, they aren't big. They might be that the, you know, the app's mascot tells you you've done a good job, or you've finished like one specific class, or you've memorized like a certain number of words. But all of those very small doses of dopamine rush and, you know, of motivation amounted over, you know, a long amount of time are gonna amount at some point to something big, and like to a very good feeling associated to learning the language, which is probably going to make me, you know, actually follow through with it. Which is something that I noticed that if I use, for example, just plain like a textbook vocab list, or, you know, just Anki flashcards, for example, I don't get that gratification feeling, and it's not as fun for me to learn the language, or like to learn whatever I'm learning that way. So I'm less likely to do it.
I see. So then do you use these apps in conjunction with other tools, or is this like the primary source of your language learning?
Please don't just rely on language learning apps, because even though the feeling that you're gonna get is a very good one, the quality of what you're learning is just not comparable to, you know, other resources.
Yeah, that's one thing we can agree upon.
For me, using this app as a kind of like a complement for a lot of other things that might be more boring or less fun, like less gratification that I get out of it. Using the app is kind of, you know, the dopamine giver, kind of like an energy and motivation source. So whenever I'm learning a language with other resources that might be more effective, and I also like using, it's not like I don't like using them, it's just that I have a lot less, you know, of an attention time spent for them. I can burn out a lot quicker with them. Yeah, that's kind of like the role that language learning app plays for me in language learning.
Whenever I used apps in the past though, it's like they introduce like different topics, different sections, and they give you like tons of words that don't really relate. Like I used a Busuu, which is actually supposedly a more useful and more efficient and just an all-around better app, or a counterpart app to Duolingo. And then I was learning about pets, and then they were giving me like hamster, parrot, and all these other animals. I think it was like 20 or 30 words that I will never use in the future. Like how do you reconcile with that? Are the words that they choose the most useful words?
Yeah, I definitely agree with this, and I definitely see it as an issue sometimes that you're kind of forced to learn everything by topic, and so even topics that you maybe are not really interested in right now, you know, are not priorities for you to learn, but that you still have to, the app forces you to, before you can even move on to the next level. And which is actually the reason that I found that this app, Jimbopath, that I just made a video on my channel, reviewing the app and talking to the developers, they don't go by this principle of having to learn everything by topic kind of periodically. Instead, they give you the control of choosing what words you want to learn when. So I definitely think that is a big handicap language learning apps have, is this kind of set path that you are forced to follow. But I do find it helpful to have my vocab in different groups, so that I'm not just learning anything random, and that I feel like I'm then able to talk about a specific topic, because then whenever somebody asks you anything about, I don't know, for example, cooking, you're gonna have so much vocab about cooking that you're gonna be able to talk about that. So that's gonna make you feel like you've made a lot of progress.
This is another pet peeve that I have about apps. It's the streaks. Honestly, like I get that streaks can be a really great motivation for people. Like it feels great to see like the little, what is it, the fire on Duolingo, or all the flames just like burning into like an inferno with like all the different numbers, and like you have like 100-day streaks, 200-day streaks, 300-day streaks. So I can understand why that would motivate people to keep learning. But one thing that I found is I'm a pretty anxious person. I get stressed out fairly easily. So seeing the streak, and then when I missed a day, it would just like completely derail my entire language learning. I would just completely stop. I tried learning Chinese like 3 years ago, and I used these apps. And after I lost my streak, I just stopped for like 2 years. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. And I can see how having this kind of streak that you can't break because, you know, the perfectionism can be a very, like a huge source of pressure for yourself. For me, there's this balance between pressure and motivation and kind of, you know, accountability, that it keeps me accountable. It kind of holds my hand and forces me to do something. In this case specifically, for me, the accountability and the motivation that I get out of this does outweigh the internal pressure that I get from it. But I can definitely see how this can be something, especially for people who get very frustrated with, you know, small details, how this can be like a very big breaker and just make them not want to start doing it at all.
Mm-hmm. So then do you find it's more helpful as like a tracking tool as well to see, okay, I went through these lessons, I did this for X amount of days, did I know these amount of words according to this app?
Yeah, I think the tracking aspect can definitely be a very good aspect, but I don't think necessarily that it's the best it's done by those streaks. I don't really think that the streaks have the purpose of tracking your progress, since it doesn't really give you any insights as to what your progress is. It just tells you, oh, you've logged into the app, or oh, you've done so and so, you know, like 1 or 2 things. Like, it doesn't really give you any insight of what your progress actually is. So I don't really think that streaks are there for progress tracking. I think they are there for this thing of accountability, to keep the users accountable, and of course to keep them coming back, and then they can get more money out of people using the app.
Yeah.
But I think, while I think that progress tracking is one of the best things and most important things that you can do, and because it is so important, many apps do also have like another design function to track this progress specifically and break it down into different categories of progress that you've made. But I don't think that streaks are there for that. I think streaks are there for people like me who sometimes need a parent to parent them.
I think both of us can agree that apps are more sort of a supplementary source as opposed to a primary source of language learning. It can't replace other methods. For me, it's textbook sentence mining, immersion, and Nina can talk about hers in her own video as well. Go to her channel for that video. Do you have any other things that you want to share? Any final thoughts about this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can only agree. I think this is something where we can find like the most common ground in, that we both don't think that language learning apps should be your primary source or like even your main source of, you know, language learning content. They, in my opinion, they can be a very good addition to it, but you should definitely not rely on it, just because while the gratification might be there, and it might feel like you're doing a lot of progress,
Yeah.
the contents of the app, like quality-wise and difficulty-wise and complexity-wise, they're just not very good. You're only gonna, because it's just not possible. They can't quiz you on complex things. The things can't be that complex if you're able to answer with just a few thumb clicks. So really all the app can do is just give you very, you know, easy and sort of basic groundwork and foundation. But if you want to learn a language like fluently or to a higher level, even past a beginner level, even if you want to learn it at an intermediate level, then language learning apps, they no longer really do the trick for you. And definitely not in all aspects of learning a language, like reading, writing, and speaking and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you bring up as well. Like, there are a lot of things that can aid in our learning, but it's a collaboration between these different resources that ultimately lead us to the level of fluency that we do desire. You can't just use one thing or another thing, but using things in conjunction with each other can help either with motivation or with the learning in and of itself. So main point is, you do you. Whatever helps you learn, you can do that. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nina, so much for joining me and joining the rest of my viewers and imparting your own wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We should do this more often. This is fun.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Please leave in the comments below if you do or you don't use apps and your reasons for or against it. But let's be very cordial. We can have difference of opinions, and clearly Nina and I do have very different opinions as to what is useful or what is not as useful in language learning, but we can still grow and learn from each other as well. I hope everyone has a lovely day, a lovely evening, and a lovely rest of your language learning journey. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.